It's London calling for Billy Bang Blitz in Metroidvania episode 18.
お湯をかけると元に戻るわけなんだ。
Arriving about half a year after Bionic Commando, we have a fascinating case of convergent evolution. Grappling hooks notwithstanding, Clash at Demonhead incorporates a lot of the same narrative and structural concepts as Bionic Commando, but does a better job of blending them all into a single, contiguous, interlocking world.
Yes, here we have almost exactly the same map concept as the one found in Bionic Commando the previous summer and canonized soon after by Super Mario Bros. 3. Although the core action takes place on foot as a side-scrolling combat game, you move around the world at liberty by selecting destinations on an abstract map. However, Clash at Demonhead does put its own distinct spin on things. The area numbers you see here don't indicate the map points, but rather the routes between them. The destination points simply represent a junction where you return to the overview map and select a new destination. While this might seem a subtle difference from the Mario 3 Bionic Commando approach of setting action stages in the map points themselves, it makes a difference to the game's structure. Everything is truly interconnected. Despite the fact that you choose destinations on a map, you don't actually move at all on the world map screen. If the game were to take away its map view and simply give you multiple exits once you reach the end of a route, it would work the same and be a seamless open world. The map simply makes the whole thing more manageable by giving players a quick break and a visual representation of their current location in the world. And this truly is an open world, even more so than Castlevania 2's. A rare case of legitimate freeform traversal on the level of the original Legend of Zelda in the shape of a platformer. As in Zelda, you can indeed start the adventure and make your way north through increasingly difficult hazards to the mountain where the greatest dangers lie in wait. To complete Clash at Demonhead, you need to achieve a variety of video game objectives like defeating bosses, earning MacGuffins, rescuing captives, and acquiring better stuff. But you can do more or less all of those things at any time, in a sense, provided you find the proper NPCs to talk to first. You can even stumble upon the hidden entrance that will lead to the endgame once it's unlocked, if you poke around early in the correct route. You can face off against most of the main game bosses straight away, since they all operate from fixed locations at the end of specific routes. The question is, can you actually defeat them before you've bulked up protagonist Billy Bang Blitz? Bang only gains a few permanent improvements throughout the game. In addition to buffing up his max health, he can also learn 5 magic skills called Force Powers from a hermit. Otherwise, though, everything in Demonhead revolves around its cash-based economy. You can acquire all manner of cool gear and tools, ranging from secondary weapons to health refills to equipment to navigate the world. Bang can use super boots that extend the range of his jumps, a jetpack that lets him fly freely, scuba gear and a super suit that enable him to swim through water and lava respectively. A lot of really impressive tools that open up the world even more. However, none of these abilities remain with Bang permanently. Rather, you acquire them as expendable tools that you can use once for a limited duration. And they all come from the same place, the shop located on Route 5. You can purchase many of these navigational tools right from the start, though some only become available after a certain amount of time has passed, provided you have the cash on hand to pay for them. But once you use one, it's gone forever, and you have to go pick up a new one from the shop. You even need to buy an expendable tool in order to receive a password and save your progress. It's cutthroat capitalism here in the world of Demonhead. But on the plus side, cash in Demonhead is plentiful, especially once you locate the gold exchange where you can trade gold nuggets for cash. And the game makes extensive use of its open concept design, as there's no such thing as a bottomless pit or death by falling. While many pools of water and magma are only as deep as the current screen, others allow you to dive right in and swim to new areas. This happens as early as, well, Route 5. The shop appears over top of a flooded conduit, and you can see hints of the underwater passage as you ascend to the shop, enticing you to make the aqualung your first major purchase. Dive into the water beside the shop and you'll come to a space where you can collect gold nuggets, which more than cover the cost of the aqualung you've purchased. Once you find the exchange, of course. Spend too long in the water without an aqualung, or take a magma dive without your Type D equipment, and it's game over for Bang. But if he falls into a pit, he never dies. He simply plunges into a throughway that spits him back out into the world map and allows him to try again. If you keep falling into the same pit, well, that's your sign that you need to buy some jump boots or a jetpack from the shop and brute force the situation. The penalty for a game over is remarkably forgiving, too. The game simply kicks Bang back to his most recent world map junction with no loss of equipment or cash, allowing you to throw yourself at challenges over and over again, or to just farm a load of cash for better temporary gear. By and large, the gameplay loop in Clash at Demonhead amounts to traveling the world, looking for bosses who award you the medallions you need to take on the final boss, seeking NPCs who relay critical information, and gathering cash in order to acquire tools and weapons. The interconnected routes can take a while to traverse, at least until you acquire the Hermit's teleportation force skill, but many routes allow canny shoppers to take shortcuts. For example, you can use Route 27 to take a quick trip into the northern mountains, rather than going the long way around, provided you have a supersuit on hand to protect you in the magma that's flooded the path. Nothing else on NES plays quite like Clash at Demonhead, and its amateurish graphics and raucous sense of humor belie a remarkably ambitious approach to freeform design in an 8-bit action title. This is hardly the most influential game on the platform. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that no one except Scott Pilgrim author Brian Lee O'Malley was influenced by it at all. But Vic Tokai created a pretty incredible combination of a true open world with an action platformer that incorporates numerous key RPG concepts. A bold entry in the early Metroidvania canon, all wrapped up in goofy 1970s shounen manga aesthetics. Speaking of Super Mario Bros. 3, that game deserves a mention here as well, but not because it defined the Metroidvania format or anything, quite the opposite. The game's October 1988 launch in Japan represented a sea change for action platform gaming. Between 1986 and 88, the idea of big, sprawling, complex platform games featuring role-playing elements and freedom of choice had really taken hold in Japan in a huge way. But as 1988 wound down, Super Mario Bros. 3 arrived and rolled back the hands of the genre to a more pure action milieu. And it was brilliant, and it was massively successful. An entire industry had been chasing Dragon Quest and Xanadu and Tower of Duraga and Zelda II, trying to figure out how to integrate their design principles into action games. Super Mario 3 demonstrated that it's enough for an action game to just be a damn good action game, and the world took notice. 1989 would see the release of a hefty number of Metroidvania-adjacent games, most of which had almost certainly been conceived or greenlighted before Mario 3 set the charts on fire. By the end of the year, though, the drive by Japanese console titles toward perfecting the Metroidvania largely tapered off, and pure action platformers surged once again to the fore on Famicom and its competitors, PC Engine and Mega Drive. Which isn't to say that Mario 3 didn't draw any elements at all from the non-linear exploration games that dominated Famicom prior to its launch. Not only did it drop players into a world map that allowed for discretionary movement around a board game like space packed with events and unlockable obstacles, it also gave Mario a rudimentary inventory and rewarded players for exploring its stages even more so than previous Mario games had. But at heart, Mario 3 felt like the sort of platformer that had fallen out of favor for a while. Its action centered on pure skill, and its world design highlighted creative variety over intricate interconnections. For the next 5 years, the exploratory platformer turned into something of a non-entity, replaced by white-knuckle platform action games like Mega Man 3, Strider, Batman, Power Blade, and Shockman. The Zelda-inspired action RPG would rise to take its place, at least for a while.
Before we dive all the way into 1989, there's one last 1988 release to look at, Exile. No, that's not the same Exile that came out for Acorn Electron. It's a completely different game by the same name that came out also in 1988.
Exile, or XZR, as in Eguzairu, sees Nihon Telenet approaching the action RPG concept perhaps more literally than anyone before them. In a way, it feels like an attempt to push Zelda II back toward the feel of some of the Dragon Slayer titles, especially Xanadu. The core of the action here plays out as, well, I can't really call it a side-scroller, since the dungeon design consists of static screens that move choppily on PC-88, or scroll all at once when you reach the screen edge on MSX2. Either way, it definitely has the look and feel of Zelda II or Xanadu, with sword and shield-based combat. However, outside of these combat scenarios, you move from location to location by way of a simple world map in which you choose a destination and move there immediately. At each destination, you spend much of your time wandering around in a Dragon Quest-style town view packed with dialogue boxes. You speak to NPCs for clues, shop for gear, and advance the storyline by walking around a simple, top-down, tile-based perspective. It's only once you connect with critical information and complete specific plot objectives that you can move into the more action-oriented scenarios to explore, grapple with foes, dodge attacks, and cast various spells. Structurally, XZR is nearly as open-ended as Clash at Demonhead, except that it places an even greater emphasis on your companion characters. Where Clash at Demonhead sent you out to rescue Bang's girl Mary and avenge his fallen comrade, XZR protagonist Sadler has to locate and team up with his fellow assassins so they can join in his quest to save the Islamic world from crisis. Yes, XZR takes place in a setting not entirely removed from the magic of Scheherazade, but where Culture Brain's NES game felt suitably kid-friendly, drawing on themes of 1001 Arabian Nights, Telenet directed their creation to the more adult audience that gamed on personal computers at the time, and rooted their adventure in the real-world Order of Assassins, up to and including the warriors' use of narcotics in their activities. If the look and setting of this adventure strike a familiar chord, that's because Telenet would adapt the sequel, XZR2 Kanketsuhin, for Sega Genesis and Turbo CD, where it saw release for the US market as Exile. But the original XZR had a much darker tone and a looser structure than those conversions and their sequel, Wicked Phenomenon. Released only in Japan for PC-88 and MSX2, XZR is yet another of the many inventive action RPGs of the late 80s that hinted at Metroidvania design concepts, but were ultimately too mired in obscurity to exert any real gravity on the genre.
Next time on Metroidvania Works, Adol Kristen goes Zelda 2, while Kunio-kun goes Dragon Quest.